Hi, I'm Tara, and welcome to Let's Do Books. Email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with any questions or comments, or come join our Facebook group, the Lesbian Review Book Club. I'm joined today by Wendy Hudson, author of 3 lesbian fiction novels. The latest is Meant to Be Me, and it's available everywhere from Ilva Publishing. Welcome, Wendy.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
So you are here today to share some books that you think other people should read. Do you have any kind of a theme or anything like that?
Not really. I kind of cover a few different genres, actually. I know when I spoke to you before and I'd got it down to like 12 favourites, which you told me was absolutely too many.
It is.
So I thought, well, I'll maybe go for ones on the list that are maybe a little bit older or not quite so well known. There are a couple of newer titles, but they've like already become favourites, and a couple are also sort of more mainstream published maybe, which actually makes them quite difficult to find. So it's always quite good when you come across a little gem, I think, that's been mainstream published. But yeah, I wanted to try and cover a variety of genres because, to be honest, I read across most of them.
That's great. So what is the first book that you want to share?
Okay, well, the first one is called Pages for You, and it's by Sylvia Brownrigg. I've actually got a little quote from one of the reviews which says that this book is basically a love letter written for a lost lover. And I think it sums it up actually really well. So basically it's around a girl called Flannery Jansen. She's 17, just arrived at university, and she comes across this other woman, Anne, in like a local diner. She basically falls completely dramatically and desperately in love with her. It's like a love at first sight. And then really slowly their paths kind of start to intertwine, and Flannery essentially becomes Anne's student in life and love, I suppose. Yes, I was so in love with this book when I read it. It was actually one of the first books I read that had a lesbian relationship in it. Because it was written in 2001, so I was 19 at the time. And it was kind of cool because Flannery was 17, I was 19, so I could see those comparisons kind of between us. And what happens is Anne actually turns out to be her 28-year-old teaching assistant. So she's much more experienced and worldly, and they just have this crazy, passionate love affair, basically. So I suppose you could say it is a kind of student-teacher setup, which we know is a bit of a trope, but I think it's so wonderfully written, and it doesn't have the kind of ending that you might expect, or it doesn't follow the same kind of arc that you might expect from that trope. It's all from Flannery's point of view as well, which I found quite interesting. It's all about just really how this love affair affected her, how she kind of grew creatively under it as well, under like Anne's influence, how she dealt with her sort of first taste of love and heartbreak. And it basically just spurred me to go and like seek out loads more stories like this. You know, I was just like, wow, lesbians, I have to go and find more, basically. And I hadn't actually come out then as well, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one is much more love story than romance. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is a love story. It's very intense, very quickly, and kind of passionate. And they just kind of consume each other almost. Just how fast things move, and how, particularly Flannery, how dependent she becomes on this relationship. But in a kind of innocent way, in quite a beautiful way, I think.
Didn't Sylvia Brownrigg recently, like, when I say recently, I mean within the last year or two, release a sequel to this?
She did, yeah, called Pages for Her. So that was 2017, 16 years after the original, and she actually aged the characters in real time. And they meet again and are both in very different situations, circumstances, you know, marriage and divorce and children and things. And because I was then also in my 30s, the same as Flannery, it was like really amazing to read. It was like, oh, look what she's doing now, and look what I'm doing now. Oh, look, I'm a lesbian now.
Yeah.
The penny's finally dropped. So it didn't have quite the same impact, I think, being older and having read a lot more since then, but I still really enjoyed it. I was so excited when I saw that it was coming out.
Yeah, I haven't read those two. I mean, I haven't read any of the books that you're talking about today. Spoiler for everybody else. But these are ones that... No, that's okay. Never apologize for introducing new books, because I'm probably going to walk away cursing you for adding, 5 to 8 new books to my list.
Well, I feel like now this is like my mission for the podcast, is to actually sell these books to you.
Mm-hmm.
To move up your, no doubt, endless to-be-read list.
It's a little embarrassing for the, not for review. I have a separate list, for books I'm reviewing, but yeah. But that's on there. I have it. I bought it. And I think you have convinced me to move it up the list, so. Good.
You'll have to let me know what you think anyway.
I will. What is the next book on your list?
Okay, so this one was kind of controversial. It's called Exquisite, and it's by Sarah Stovell. And this book genuinely had me gripped from start to finish. And it's one of the few books I've read that I had to read it in one sitting. There was no other choice. I just had to know what happened. And it's not all guns blazing action kind of thriller. It's really psychological and kind of sinister in a way. So it's told from 2 points of view. You have Bo, who kind of seemingly has it all. She has a loving family and a daughter and a beautiful home and husband and kind of a handful of best-selling novels to her name. And she's kind of living this lovely little writer's life. And then you have Alice, who's much younger, and she's a kind of aspiring writer. She's sort of drifting through life, and a string of sort of dead-end jobs behind her and a freeloading boyfriend, and it's all just terrible, but all she knows is she wants to write. And then they actually meet at this writer's retreat, and the chemistry is kind of instant. And from that point, then this kind of sinister relationship develops between them. Your face, I know other people can't see your face, but your face now is brilliant.
Okay.
And for me, it's a really perfect example of when to use a kind of unreliable narrator. So it kind of basically, it keeps you guessing all the way through as to who is telling the truth, because you're getting Bo's side of the story about their relationship and you're getting Alice's side, and you're kind of they're both so untrustworthy. You don't know who is telling the truth. It's actually, in a way, I suppose it's another sort of teacher-student book, which until I was sort of thinking about the books, I hadn't really thought about it in that way. I think because Alice is maybe a little bit older than a typical student might be. And again, it's just a lot more complexities than you might see with that kind of trope. I think the author just constructed such a clever story, just so psychological and kind of chilling. And it was just so many reactions from me, so many reactions. I mean, from the sound of it, you can clearly think that there's probably not the happiest of endings, but I would say don't let that put you off, definitely.
How creepy is this book? I am a big baby.
I mean, there's no blood and murder and that kind of thing. It's more just, like I said, the psychological impact that they kind of have on each other and the others around them as well. Okay.
I just need to know, is there any kind of sexual assault or anything like that happens in the book?
No.
Okay, that's just one of my no-goes, so.
Yeah, no, not that I can remember, actually, no.
So if somebody is a big baby and doesn't typically read thrillers, would this still be an okay place to start with thrillers?
I think it would be, because it's not like any of them are in kind of danger or, like I said, there's any sort of murder or brutal kind of scenes or anything like that. It's more that you are just... I just found myself reading it being what? What did she do? What did she say? Is that real? And the number of times I was just oh my God, you bitch. for both characters as well.
Okay. I'm going to say that I might give that one a try. You have me intrigued.
Okay, good.
But I might wait for like a particularly low anxiety day.
Yeah. I could actually really see this one as a movie, I think. Yeah, I definitely could see it as this kind of psychological movie.
Okay.
You're listening to the Lesbian Talk Show. TheLesbianTalkShow.com, your hub of podcast information.
So what is your next book? Okay, so this one is a bit more suspenseful and thrillerish. It does maybe have a couple of brutal scenes in it, so I'm not sure how you feel about it. It's a book called Snare, and it's by, I may not pronounce this correctly, it's Lilja Sigurdardóttir. She's an Icelandic author.
We'll put the name with the link to Amazon in the show notes for people who want to go get it.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure I just hashed that up. But anyway, I mean, I absolutely love mystery, suspense, thrillers, which is probably why my books always start as romances, but inevitably murder ends up happening somewhere. Yeah, my mind, my mind just goes there. I can't help it. So this is a really great example of Icelandic noir, and it kind of gives you all those mystery, suspense, thriller elements. And I got really excited actually when I'd finished it to find out that it was the first in a trilogy. But it's just the first one that had been translated. So with this book, you meet Sonia, who's the main character. She's kind of struggling to provide for herself, keep custody of her son. She's had this really messy divorce, and everything's just kind of falling apart around her. So, I mean, obviously she ends up smuggling cocaine into Iceland, because...
As you do.
As you do. And more surprisingly, she finds she's actually really good at it, because she's just this anonymous woman, you know, and she sort of dresses to make herself just look like a kind of generic businesswoman who may do all these short business travel trips to Europe and things. So it's meant for her to be a kind of short-term solution, but because of her skills, she kind of gets the attention of the bigger bosses, and before long she is basically snared in this whole web of crime. She ends up, there's a really interesting kind of side story where she's sort of pitted against this really experienced customs officer. He's like coming up to retirement, you know, he's seen it all and he just has this kind of sixth sense, and he starts watching her, becomes suspicious, so she has to come up with like more and more daring strategies to kind of get the drugs into the country. And that just like really keeps you gripped, this sort of cat and mouse game. And then if that's not enough, because, you know, things are more complicated because of her relationship with a banker named Agla. So that's where the kind of lesbian relationship comes into it. Well, I suppose they're both bisexual, actually. I think what I like about it is there's no big deal made about the fact that she has been married to a man, has a child, and then is in a relationship with a woman. It's just her sexuality, none of that. It's just not a thing. And I quite appreciated that. But Agla is actually currently being prosecuted for her part in the Icelandic financial crash. So you get kind of her perspective from that. And with the different connections to these finance people, to the drug dealers, it just takes loads of really surprising twists and turns, and all their lives kind of cross in unexpected ways. And one of the twists towards the end, actually genuinely, I didn't see come in, and that's quite rare for me. So yeah, really compelling book, and really interesting because of the setting and stuff as well, I thought. So you should read that one.
Okay. Do you know if the other two are likely to be translated?
Yeah, the second one is called Trap. I've actually read that as well, so it's been translated already. Also just as good. I really enjoyed both of them. I'm not sure about the third though.
Oh, that one might not be ready yet?
No.
So you have something to look forward to.
Yeah, exactly. It's on my, to watch list. So I just look it up every now and again, and no, still not. So looking forward to that one, definitely.
Nice. So, what is your next book?
So my next one is actually a kind of, young adult, new adult book. I think there's just some really wonderful writing, I think, in that genre. And there was 3 or 4 on my list of 12 that would come into that category. And so I was really torn, there's classics like The Gravity Between Us and Just Juliet, A Line in the Dark by Melinda Lowe, which I think I'd mentioned to you before about that one, had I?
I don't think so. I know Melinda Lowe often comes up. Anne McMahon, when she was on the podcast a couple of years ago, talked about Ash by Melinda Lowe, which I think was kind of the one where she that was what broke her out on the scene, I think.
Yeah. That was almost a kind of retelling of Cinderella, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And she did another one that was a kind of Macbeth retelling as well, which I quite enjoyed. I think that was her. Sorry, Melinda, if it wasn't you. But A Line in the Dark, I liked. It was, again, it was another kind of thriller. But I decided, though, to go for an Emily O'Byrne book. I just think she's one of the best kind of young adult, new adult writers that I've read. I have read all of her books, enjoyed all of them. So I've actually just gone for her first one, which is called A Story of Now. And it kind of focuses on Claire, who's 19. She's had a bit of a confidence-shattering year, bad breakups, friends who've kind of drifted away, and she has this constant feelings of failure, living up to her parents' expectations and stuff. So she's just kind of decided she wants to make new friends. She wants to essentially get a life. She just feels like she doesn't have a life. But she's kind of quite sassy and a bit prickly, and for her own good sometimes, I think, so struggles to make new friends. And then the other characters you get then is Robbie and Mia, who kind of come into her life unexpectedly, and she feels like they're not really her kind of people, but eventually they don't give up and they become friends. And then her and Mia then form this kind of quite unexpected, very lovely friendship that then develops into more. But I just think all Emily O'Byrne's characters, they're always just really well drawn, and you feel like you know them, like you're almost part of this little friendship group, and they're all very individual and with their characteristics and stuff. I quite enjoy that most of them tend to be more in their late teens as opposed to younger teens. So they are adults, just starting out, just discovering themselves, first relationships and things. And yeah, I just really appreciate that they're not always coming out stories. They're just generally young people living their lives and figuring things out. Yeah, so have you read any of her books?
I haven't, I'm embarrassed to say, but I'm pretty sure this one is in that to be read list. And it sounds like I need to move it up as well.
Well, I mean, I know that kind of genre is not really everyone's thing. I think I just quite like them because I sort of pine after what I kind of potentially missed during those years myself by, not coming out and things. And so I just get really kind of nostalgic almost for that time in my life. And so I love seeing all these stories and, yeah, just imagining that what I could have had back then as well. I'm sure there's a lot of people out here there who do feel like that too.
I felt that way definitely when I read The Space Between, because that's the, I hope she's going to forgive me, I'm probably going to pronounce her last name wrong, but that's Michelle Teichmann's first book.
Yeah.
And what she writes about with that, in Ontario, Canada, daughter of, I think she's I can't remember if she's the daughter of a pastor?
Yeah, she's from a Christian family.
But and it's there was a lot of stuff that definitely resonated for me because I grew up in small town Ontario and my dad was a deacon and the same kind of, the exact same kind of a church. It was almost eerie. But I didn't know what was up with myself either. Like, I've talked about this in other podcasts about how, like, luckily I was attracted to, like, enough boys where I was like, totally straight. My parents are not going to put me in conversion therapy. This is wonderful. They're not going to send me to a camp. Yay. You know, so when I read that book, it was uncomfortable. It was very good, but it was really uncomfortable because it felt like another way that my life could have unfolded.
Yeah, definitely. I've read that one as well. I'm friends with Michelle, and I remember when it first came out and just how proud of it she was too. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed that one. And I think there's a lot of sort of young adult, new adult where the author is obviously aiming at a certain age group, you know, so young people can kind of find solace in these stories and find some courage and just other people to identify with, you know, characters to identify with. But I think they do really speak to adults. I think if you find really good, well-written ones, they do still speak to older adults just for all those reasons you said.
I agree. And I mean, how amazing is it that teenagers are growing up with a range, like, it's not just one or two books that if you're lucky you find them, but there's like so many queer stories available for them and in mainstream bookstores. You don't have to go find the LGBT shelf.
Well, that's it. I mean, I just reeled off there like 5 or 6 that I could have chosen for this list. See, that was my sneaky way of getting extra books in.
I see it, and I appreciate it. As someone who also tacks extras onto lists.
But I would say as well with Emily, she has this real knack of describing the kind of intimate moments, just like really kind of tender and perfectly, you know, because obviously that genre tends not to be sexually graphic. So I really just appreciate her way of writing it so subtly that the feelings and those special moments still come across really well, I think. And that's probably why I chose one of hers sort of above some of the others as well, just for that kind of knack she has.
So what is your last book?
Well, I'd say I saved the best till last. This would be one of my actual all-time favourites, and I actually only discovered it this past year or so. It's called Tell It to the Bees by Fiona Shaw. It's set in the 50s in a small kind of Yorkshire town. And in the description it says it's a story set in the 50s of a secret love that gets a whole town talking and has a small boy very worried. So that's kind of how the blurb starts off. It basically centres on Lydia and her son Charlie. I think Charlie's 9. And they're trying to basically deal with the breakup of Lydia's marriage and the kind of consequences of that, her husband cheating on her and kind of leaving them with no money and things. And Charlie befriends the local doctor, Jean, and Jean has all these kind of beehives in her garden. She lives in the kind of big manor house in the village. And they essentially bond over the beehives, and she starts to teach him, harvesting the honey and things like that. Because he's kind of a lonely little boy. He doesn't really have any other friends of his own age. And then Lydia finds herself kind of homeless and without a job. And so Jean offers them a room and offers her a job as like a housekeeper. And basically their relationship grows from there. But honestly, I was just like, I had all the feels with this book. It just, I was so emotional. And people that know me know I'm not an emotional person in that way, but I just loved it. I got so involved in it, and I was kind of genuinely worried for the characters all the time. I think the build-up of the relationship's like really tender and kind of slow, and I love a slow burn romance or love story as well. But also Fiona Shaw, she offers this kind of point of view from Charlie, the young boy, and I actually think that was genius, and it's one of my favourite parts of the book is his point of view. There's just like really lovely scenes between all three of them in that kind of family dynamic and stuff, I think, that are quite understated. and although it's all secretive and new, it still kind of portrays them as this family quite positively. And we don't see very much of that, I don't think.
No, especially not for that time period.
Exactly, yeah. So the angst inevitably comes in the form of everyone in this small little Yorkshire town discovering the relationship, and the ex-husband then becoming kind of hell-bent on making Lydia's life miserable. And he ends, he uses Charlie as a weapon, that if you continue this relationship, I will take Charlie away.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was a real contrast, kind of showing Charlie's innocence against the kind of prejudice of the small town and of his dad, because although he's kind of shocked, he's more just shocked seeing his mum with someone as opposed to actually seeing his mum with Jean. So I thought that was just another way his point of view kind of added to the story.
That sounds lovely.
It is. It's so lovely. Like, I'm not someone who always needs a happy ending or even a happy for now. But I was so delighted that we got one.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, I can literally talk about this book for hours. Actually, G. Benson, myself and her both love it, and we have talked about it for hours and just how in love we are with it. We just swoon. And we're very excited that there's a film just being made of it.
That's good news. So who in particular would you recommend this one to?
Everybody. Genuinely.
Okay.
I think it's obviously going to appeal to the romance readers. It is a romance.
Mm-hmm.
But it does have that kind of element of, not thriller, but that element of suspense in terms of how the town will react and who will be on their side, who won't be on their side, and what that might look like. The kind of the danger from the ex-husband and things like that as well. So it has that, but inevitably it is just a very beautiful love story, I think.
That's wonderful. Okay, I'm going to go look for that one because I actually haven't heard of it before, so pretty excited. So, Wendy, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
I'm kind of everywhere. I'm on Facebook. You can get me at Wendy Hudson Author. I'm on Instagram, again, as Wendy Hudson Author. And Twitter is at W Hudson Author.
Sounds good. That is all for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me. I am Tara, and you've been listening to Let's Do Books. Remember to email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with your questions or comments. If you're an author who's interested in joining me on the show to talk about the lesfic you love, trends that have you interested, or how you discovered lesbian fiction, please let me know that too. If you've enjoyed this episode, please check out the show notes where you'll find a Patreon link for The Lesbian Talk Show, or visit patreon.com/The Lesbian Talk Show. Patrons get exclusive content like bonus podcasts and interviews that no one else gets access to. You can also join our Facebook group, The Lesbian Review Book Club, to talk about any of these books discussed today, or anything else that you're reading and loving. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for The Lesbian Talk Show on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, or Spotify.